Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics with an unexpected new series of videos that's going to continue into the future. And this is about cross stitch. This is coming back around. I've been cross stitching for over 40 years. I can't even believe I'm saying that. But I was a cross stitcher well before a quilter. Why? It was something that was very portable. It was something very affordable and easy to learn. And it's really where I fell in love with crafting and creating, which eventually I started including fabric in it, and well, you know what happened, right? I became a quilter. Well, I never lost my love of cross stitch, and as a whole new generation of people have now come on to the maker scene, many of you maybe have never been introduced to cross stitch, and I'm here to tell you it's so much fun. And it's not quilting or cross stitching, it's actually both. Because we all know as busy people, if we're traveling maybe to work on the subway, which many of my son's friends do who are in New York, New Jersey, they want to pass the time. Or maybe you travel, or maybe you're on a layover. That was me, right? A lot of layovers. I spent my time creating cross stitches. In fact, let's look at some of the projects I've done, many of them on layovers here, and you can see that some of these are quite elaborate here. I'm showing you some of the cross stitches I've done, certainly not all of them, and you can see that really you can create some masterpieces. Now, I have to say that the one that's the alphabet, I had a chance to teach my mom how to cross stitch, and she created this beautiful alphabet sampler for my son's nursery when he was just a baby. So most of these are the ones I've done, and I just love that I was able to share my love of cross stitch with my mom, and she went on to accomplish a lot of different pieces, this being just one of them. But if you are brand new to cross stitch and maybe you've never been exposed to this, don't think we always have to do these amazing, elaborate projects. We can do small, cute things done in a couple of hours or maybe a weekend. Let me show you what I did this weekend. Literally, this weekend, I stitched this. This is our first ever cross stitch pattern from Shabby Fabrics. Yes, we love to go well beyond using fabric and quilting. We love crafts of all kinds. And maybe there just might be an involvement of fabric a little bit later on or not. Depends on what you want to do with your finished project. So what we're providing for you is a free cross stitch pattern here. We show you this in full color as well as some symbols. We'll talk about that in just a bit. And you're able to download that and use whatever you want. It's a great starting point if you've never done a cross stitch, or maybe you're well established, it's still a free pattern for you to use. We know that with the closing of Joann's Fabrics, hey, I'm sad about that too. I was a customer there too. It may be harder for you to find the embroidery floss. Great news is that Shabby Fabrics carries 100% of all of DMC. That is the gold standard. That is the normal, most common embroidery floss. But don't be fooled. The word embroidery floss also applies to cross stitch. You use DMC embroidery floss for both cross stitch as well as embroidery and anything else you might want to do. So its name is not limiting, even though the word embroidery is in there. That's just one of the things that you can do with DMC embroidery floss. We have made these 4 colors available for you because we know it can be, as I said, difficult to find now that Joann's has closed, and many times when I'm at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, they're just out of the colors that I need. So we're doing our best to make sure that we have all colors in stock at all times, and we've put together a small embroidery floss set if you would like to just grab that. But let's dive into where did cross stitch come from. I actually did a little bit of a deeper dive, and I was surprised to find that the earliest findings of cross stitch was actually around the 6th century in Egyptian tombs. They were finding certain cloth that had this pattern of X's on it. And I think that's amazing, right? We're connecting from to a craft that was really done so far long ago, really had a strong popularity kind of almost in the 70s, 80s. It kind of was quiet, and now it's emerging again, and I'm seeing it really everywhere. So your timing is perfect to learn how to cross stitch. So let's just look here. I've got a lot of things on the table. This is the first of many videos to come. This is a beginner series. If you're an accomplished cross stitcher, you can skip everything I'm saying. You already know everything I'm going to say. Grab your free pattern and anything else you might need. And hey, by the way, subscribe. You may be completely new to our channel. Obviously, primarily, we do everything related to quilting and many facets thereof. But as we have a chance to journey down the wonderful world of cross stitch, you're going to want to tune in. So just subscribe and hit the bell. That way when we do have new videos, you know about them right away. So let's just look at what's a cross stitch. And I'm just going to kind of draw an elaborated cross stitch for you here. This is a cross stitch diagram. But in essence, let's just pretend that this is my big grid. You're simply going over, 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 and coming back. That's it. You're making an X. Here, I'll show you on the back side of this. So if we have our grid, and this is blown up, this is representing our Aida cloth here. We go over, we go over, we go over, we come back, we come back, we come back. So it is truly that simple to do. And of course, with any craft, anything we do, there's always tips and techniques to make it more efficient and more fun and faster. So it always starts off with a cloth of some kind. And the two types of cloth that you're going to hear the most about are something called Aida cloth, A-I-D-A. And I have some of that here with me. And you'll also hear about linen. So let's look back at the cross stitches that I've done before, as some of them were done on Aida cloth and some were done on the linen. The more elaborate, with the more elaborate framing, that's kind of has the shepherd with the sheep, was stitched on linen. You can see that it's very difficult to see the kind of grid in the background. That's because there's many, many more holes in a given inch. Whereas my other cross stitches, the boy holding the flying machine, as well as the angel, those were stitched on either 16 or 18 count. What does this count mean? First off, we're not going to talk about linen. As a beginner cross stitcher, I think you should not consider linen. It is a little bit more advanced. Certainly will be within your capabilities as you learn cross stitch, but it's not where you want to begin. I would encourage you as a beginner, and even as an experienced cross stitcher, 14 count is a great count. It's readily available. It gives you a nice finished size. And for me, who's getting older, I can still see the holes, right? And so what 14 count means is that in a given inch of distance, there should be about 14 holes. So you can imagine with 18 count, that means in a given inch, there's 18 holes, meaning many more, 4 more. That means they have to be smaller and closer together. Let's advance that to linen. That can be 32 count, 36 count, 36 of those holes in a given inch. So you can see right away that that is a very different experience, and we actually deal with linen a little bit differently. But that's for another video, and we will touch about linen in the future, but not for today. So we have a lovely array of 14 count available to you on our website, everything from white to a more vintage look, even kind of some more ivories. I also love Vintage Cloth by Lori Holt. She's a fabric designer for Riley Blake. In fact, one of the cross stitches I recently did, I'll show you what that looks like. And you can see this modeling here. This was the oatmeal. I like that look of it looking worn and kind of tight, like already used. It just kind of lended itself to that look. So That's another thing that you want to consider when you get ready to choose your cloth. Is this cutesy? If it is, this cloth is totally inappropriate, right? This is supposed to be vintagey, retro. It needs to, the design will really tell you what color cloth that Aida should be. So if I'm doing something more vibrant, more, not quite patriotic, but you can see that these colors, the design is quite simple, and this is just a beginner project. White was a great choice. Maybe off-white's fine, but nothing that gives you this kind of model look. So I love that we have simple, straightforward, solid colored Aida cloth, as well as more sophisticated modeling. Here's another lovely one I love to use. It's called Malted Milk, and it's got this modeling in it. So if you want to do something that's not this dark, but looking more vintage, kind of reproduction, you might be wanting to look at the Malted Milk. So the Aida cloth is a big deal, right? And many times the piece is bigger than we need. So we're going to cut that down, but we'll get to that in just a minute because I also want to go over the other supplies that you will need. We already talked about the DMC embroidery floss. There are other brands out there, absolutely other brands. There's probably 10 that I can think of. This being the most common, and this is the one that we have a full depth and breadth of. Every color we try to keep in stock. But again, if you have another brand of embroidery floss that maybe you like or you've heard of, or a friend maybe has gifted you their embroidery floss, all you need to do when you're trying to say, okay, I know I'm looking for kind of a dark teal. Grab whatever brand that might be. It doesn't have to be DMC. That just happens to be the brand that we carry. Hoops. Hoops are an important part of cross stitch. Now, sometimes I will do cross stitch, what's called in hand, where I have the cross stitch in my hand the whole time. In this case, this weekend, I did that. I did this whole thing, what's called in hand. However, with this project here, I did this in the hoop. So it does not matter, but for a beginner, because you kind of want to have your hands free, I would highly recommend hooping, which we will be going over. Hoops come in different sizes. Of course, it's all about the diameter, left to right. I believe this is a 6-inch wooden hoop. This is a hoop that is, I believe, 7 inches. The size of the hoop sometimes will depend on the size of the project you're working on. Our first desire would be to choose a hoop that does not require what's called rehooping. So let's look at this project here that I stitched over the weekend. If I were to do this project and I wanted to hoop it, the goal here would be to put the hoop over the project and never have to have a line. I've done projects that are so large, they don't make a hoop that big. And I hooped that project, right? And I started in my area and I started stitching. Well, when I was done with that area and I had to move to the next area, I had to rehoop this, and my cross stitch that I had just done was bound between this, and it kind of crushed it a little bit. Not something I loved, and I had to kind of work to try to fluff up those fibers again. So if you do choose to hoop, I encourage you to choose a hoop, if possible, where you can get the entire design inside of that hoop and you never have to hoop again. And you also don't have to hoop across the cross stitch you just did, as I did before with this much larger projects like the ones I've done before. They don't make hoops that big. You absolutely are rehooping across that cross stitch. So just something to think about. But again, as a beginner, I highly recommend that you hoop just so that you're getting comfortable. And we'll talk about, I'll demonstrate that. And when I stitch with you here shortly, I will have the project hooped, and we'll go ahead and work that way. So we know we need Aida cloth, already done. We talked about hoops, and we need embroidery floss, but we need needles too. As quilters, historically, we're looking for the sharpest needle we can find. that's just a part of being a quilter. But here's what I know about needles that are too sharp, as I discovered when I kind of got back into cross stitching here now about 6 months ago, is the needles that I've always had for hand embroidery that I want sharp, very sharp, because I'm going through cloth. I'm not going through Aida cloth. I was going to actually to do hand embroidery. I need a sharp needle to pierce that fabric so I can do the hand embroidery. What I discovered about bringing that needle forward into cross stitch is that that needle was so sharp that while I was hunting for my grid, to go in my grid of Aida cloth, it would now go anywhere. So I often did not hit my point, my hole, I would say, in my Aida cloth. It would just went anywhere. So there are specific needles that are almost slightly dulled on the tip so that they're hunting for the hole of an Aida cloth. And the needles that I have found to be the most effective for doing cross stitch are actually tapestry needles. So I've got some here. These are the Bone, and I've also heard of cross stitch needles, Bone of France here. These are actually say cross stitch. Cosmo, that's a Japanese maker of needles. This is a variety pack. So maybe you're working on a project that maybe you're not using Aida cloth, but you want to do a cross stitch technique. Maybe you're working with something as thick as pearl cotton, and you have a nice open wide Aida cloth, maybe 8 or 10 count. This has a variety pack, so that's another option. But the point is, you are not going for the sharpest needle you can find. No, you are looking for a tapestry-esque or cross-stitch type needle that is almost intentionally a little dulled on that tip so that it really only has one place to land, and that's in the holes of your Aida cloth. Let's just look at the embroidery floss skein. That's another place to start. This is 100% cotton. This is 8.7 yards of embroidery floss. And many times you do not use all of what you have, but now you own this. You don't want to discard that. You're like, what do I do with it? Well, you can do what I have often done, and that is to wrap them around. These are kind of called DMC bobbins. They're not the bobbins that we use on our sewing machines, but they call them bobbins. I've always called these cards because they're made of cardboard, whereas these are made of plastic. So let me just talk to you about what these are. And the point is to, in fact, we will just open these up, and I'm just going to wind these on here. I wasn't expecting to do that, but let's just do it. Let's just experience this. Let's open up a package of these. Now you'll want to have a permanent marker so that you can write the number on there. You might want to write the number first. So in this instance, 3810. I would write that number right there, 3810. Some people actually write it on both sides and make sure it's dry before you touch it. And notice this ring right here. What is that? Well, if you knew you were doing a project that had 6 or 8, 10 colors, and you have your DMC wrapped on these cards, whatever colors you happen to be using for your project, because remember, you're going to accumulate this DMC floss over time. You hook them onto the ring, and those go with you with your project. It's a way of keeping track of your embroidery floss. But the way that I like to manage wrapping this on is the first thing is I make sure that I keep that with me, and I only do one at a time. I've done this before where I've taken off several of the wrappers, laid them out, and then I'm like, uh-oh, I no longer remember which one was which. So you see how this has a loop here, right there? I like to get that right around my wrist. With this slit, I go into the slit, leaving enough here in the opening, and I just simply wrap that onto the bobbin. Now there's all kinds of storage containers out there. It does not need to be fancy. Something that kind of has these small little compartments where you can either have the bobbins on their side or vertical as you choose. And for the one that I have, everything is in numerical order. I prefer that because many times, even though these colors are very close and maybe other teals, these numbers can be wildly different. I would rather have my embroidery floss bobbins in numerical order from 1 to all the way up to wherever that number's ending these days than having them kind of color grouped. It might be prettier color grouped, but it makes it harder for me to actually find that because sometimes patterns don't give you color coding at all. The diagram is not even in color. Many of them are in black and white and use symbology only in numbers. I don't even know what I'm looking for, but if I'm just trying to get a number in numerical order, I'm much more likely to find it. Now, once I have that wrapped on, I simply bring that to that and that's ready to go, keeping in mind that the number is here. So when I store them, that number is usually up or on the side, and they're all on the same registration. So I can just tilt my head to the side as I flip through, finding the number that I'm looking for. So that's how we use those. Now, you have the choice of buying the 28 bobbins with the ring or buying the refill. Personally, for me, I love buying the ring every time. It's just like 10 or 15 cents more than the refill, but then I have another bobbin ring that I find useful for a lot of things. But if you're like, I already have enough of those, then you can be picking this up here that's got the ring as well as the refills. There's also the cardboard version that notice there is a hole that you could punch out, but just the friction of moving them across the ring, I've experienced this. They can at times want to tear out at the top. I have plenty of those at home because that's what existed in the beginning before the plastic bobbin came along. But again, if you think you're going to be using those on a ring, I would encourage you toward the plastic. The cardboard is a little bit more economical, but they're all super affordable. So choose whatever's right for you. Use whatever marking tools you want. A micron pen is perfect for this one. It should not wipe off. And then really anything you want here. But again, I would suggest a permanent marker and not like a gel ink. That's going to smear. You don't want that. Okay, so getting yourself kind of organized, especially after a project is done. In the beginning, you don't have embroidery floss, right? Maybe your first cross stitch that you're going to do with us is this one, and this is all your cross stitch embroidery floss in the whole world. That's fine. Just start that journey of keeping it in safekeeping because that color will come again in a future project. It just will. Get a nice sharp pair of scissors. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. You do not need to break the bank. But like the kind of kids craft scissors, forget it. Those are not sharp enough because we do know that when we're getting ready to make a nice clean cut of our embroidery floss, we don't want any fraying. We want a nice clean cut. I happen to have the Kai scissors. This is my go-to for quilting and cross stitch. So that's just a suggestion. When we get ready to use embroidery floss, I mentioned that on the skein there's 8.7 yards, but there's something else on there. There's 6 strands that are kind of twisted together. So you have 6 strands that are 8.7 yards. But here's the great news. We only actually use 2 strands at a time. And the way you separate this is important. I have had absolute tangled messes not following the procedure that I'm going to show you here. This has been a technique that has served me well. So let's say that I've already used some of this as I have. First thing that we're going to do is just extend this laterally. Now, I'm going to teach you a technique that is perhaps different than you may have seen on some cross-stitch channels. Many people say to go from your shoulder to your wrist. I'm going to tell you to double that because I'm going to teach you a technique that is going to serve you so well. We do not ever tie knots in cross stitch, ever. So that's the first rule. So I'm going to teach you a technique that is going to secure your cross stitch, make the back of your cross stitch very attractive, very organized, and that is going to start with not just a length from your shoulder to your wrist, but doing it again. Okay. But this is going to require that the technique I'm going to show you is the technique you use to start your cross stitch. So let's do that real quick and give a cut. Now with this longer piece here, we have 6 strands. I'm not just going to grab 2 and yank, or I'm going to have an absolute mess on my hand. So I grab one of those strands, and I'm going to pull that. And notice how it begins to untwist. Do you see this action? Hopefully from the overhead camera. You can see this moving. And I have to work it down to get this out so I don't make a mess. So I'm actually going to use only one. You're like, but you said there's 2 strands. Yes, but let me show you why we doubled that length. Let's grab a needle. I'm going to use the cross stitch needles today from Bobbin. I've actually never used their needles. I'm excited to do that. I've used their tapestry needles, but never their cross stitch. I'm going to grab both ends of that strand. I just get this a little bit wet, literally in my mouth. Notice I have 2 strands now. That's where the 2 strands comes from. And I have to tell you, it's really a very sweet story. I was cross-stitching in San Francisco. We were delayed. The captain and I were there. We had our flight attendants, and I started taking on my cross-stitch, long delay. And apparently a flight attendant was watching me because I had cut it from here to here, 2 strands, got those out, and threaded my needle. She said, "Can I show you something?" I'm like, "Of course." She taught me this technique that I'm teaching you right now. So it's so sweet that it's being moved forward, and it is how I've always done it ever since she taught me that. That by creating this loop in the end, it actually secures our thread so much better. And I'll be showing you that when we move into the close-up. It's literally, I'm going to be sitting down. Well, I won't be on set right here. I'll be in another location. And I'll show you why we do that. I'm also going to show you how to do it if you don't do it that way. And why would you ever not do it that way? So I'll be covering all of that as well. But I wanted to point out to you that the length of that, many people will say here to here, here to here. Get 2 strands of that, thread your needle. That's how I learned. That's how I did it for years until that day in San Francisco when somebody showed me there's a better technique that's way more fun and secures the end of that embroidery floss undeniably. So much better. So I'm excited to show you that as well. So the other things that are on the table, and you might have seen this, it's kind of trending right now, is something called needle minders. And this one happens to be a sheep. It's super cute. And what are these businesses about needle minders? First off, I've done cross stitch wool for 40 years and I had never used a needle minder. So this is not an imperative. But if you like to add cute to your project and a way to secure your needle, because I admittedly, I don't know how many needles are lost on commercial airliners, but I know a portion of them have come from me because I have lost them. You drop them, right? They come sliding off the embroidery floss and they're gone. Or I meant to secure them into my project. I don't know what I did with it. So the whole point about a needle minder is the magnet goes on the back, this goes on the front, and when you're done stitching, it's minding your needle, right? It's super cute, a lot of fun, and some programs that are currently running out there even have a coordinating needle minder that goes with it, and that just makes it even fun. It's kind of a collectible. So that's called a needle minder. Again, you have to have this, right? You have to have this. We have to have needles. This is a luxury. It is an extra, but I wanted to address it so that you're just aware of what it is, what it does, how it works, and you can decide if you want to add cute to your project or not. So that's my kind of wanted to certainly mention that, and we have plenty of cute ones on our website, a lot of them from Beverly McCullough. She's an amazing designer of fabric, cross stitch, and obviously these needle minders are pretty adorable as well. So let's look at the language of how do we read these patterns. This is going to be very important for us so that we know as we move forward. We have a lot of lovely cross-stitch patterns on our website. You know how to read them. So this is one of the reasons that we wanted to obviously offer you a free pattern to download and just practice. Just have fun. If you don't have to get our embroidery floss, the point is to just cross-stitch. So this is a typical cross-stitch pattern showing you the grid, and it's very expanded. We expanded ours out so it'd be easy for a beginner and for an experienced cross-stitcher alike. So we have our colors of our embroidery floss, and we also have a symbology. Many cross-stitch patterns are not in color, so I want to make sure you're not under any illusion that many of the cross-stitch patterns you're going to find are in color. Many, if not most, are not. We feel it's always helpful, especially as a beginner, to not only have colors but symbology. Here at Shabby Fabrics, when we produce cross-stitch patterns, they will always have both color and symbology for you to reference. So that's something that we're committed to just make it easier to know where you are, what color are you working with, where are you in this pattern so you can be successful. Notice along the top, we have 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then off the edge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can see our design goes from 0 to 56, and then again, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and back down to 56. Stitch count is 56 by 56. That's what we mean. We're not saying we've counted up stitches and there's 56 total stitches this way. It's saying from left to right, the widest portion is 56 stitches this way, and the height is from north 56 stitches. So you're going to see that on many cross-stitch patterns. Now, we happen to be using 14 count Aida, and that translates into, and this is where the light bulb came on for me. I used to see many cross-stitch patterns that just had a stitch count. It would say 84 by 84, 126 by 126. I'm like, what is that in inches? And the reason they didn't actually stipulate that is it all depended on the Aida count cloth you were using. If you have a Aida cloth that only has 8 holes per inch, that cross stitch is going to be pretty big. But if you're using the linen that we spoke about with 36 holes per inch, that is going to be quite a different size. Now, linen is stitched differently. Again, I don't want to dive too much into that today. It will be a subject that I touch on as we progress in our experience with cross stitch. And if you've got the eyes for it, I want to encourage you to give it a try, because as you can see from the Shepherd's Bush project I did with the wanderer, the gatherer with his sheep, it's beautiful. Stitching on linen is truly beautiful. But getting back to our diagram here, notice how at every 10, the line is bold. I always appreciate that because I can say, okay, I can see from here to here is obviously 10. That's just 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice at the 5 mark, at the halfway, there's a slightly bolder line here, slightly bolder line here, here. These are just visual targets to help you keep your count straight. Here's what I want to encourage you toward, and this is not different than quilting. With quilting, we measure 2 or 3 times, cut once. With cross stitch, we count 2 or 3 times and then start. Because if you get off kilter or your reference point is off, everything starts to become off with it. And have I done a lot of unstitching to get back to where I saw that found the error? Yeah. But I will honestly say that just like quilting, seam ripping is not fun and neither is unstitching and cross stitch. So I've learned to count, double check my count, and then go. And then once you have some reference points, it's much easier. But in the beginning, trying to get your bearings. Where am I starting? Where am I? And then going. But we'll be talking about those strategies and pointers of how to make sure you don't get off on your count. But this is what I wanted to show you specifically about this chart. Now notice this bold kind of arrow here, 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 and here. What's that business all about? That is all about where is the center of this design. Now, in this instance, our design happened to be symmetrical. But as you can see in some of these designs here, that was not the case. The flying angel, there is no the left side looks like the right or the top or the bottom, right? It's all quite different. So knowing where the center is a very important part, and almost every cross stitch pattern I have seen identifies where that center is, and it helps it make it easier for you to go, okay, that's dead center. Then I get my Aida cloth, which we're going to do here shortly. I cut it to the size I think I need, and then I'm going to fold it in half and fold it in half, and I find my center. And sometimes I start a design right there in the middle. Many times, actually, I've done that, versus starting at the top and working my way down, right? But in this instance, because we have 56 count, or 56 stitch rather, 56 by 56, on a 14 count Aida, 56 divided by 14 is 4, okay? So let's say that I was stitching on a 10 count. 56 divided by 10 would be 5.6 inches by 5.6 inches. That's how you know the finished size that a project will be. And the reason that, of course, is important is you need to know how much Aida cloth you need. How big of a piece should I cut? So many patterns do not have what we included on this beginner page, that this 14 count we happen to use is 4 by 4 left to right and top to bottom. We thought that was helpful because in the beginner, people don't know what stitch count 56 by 56 means. How do you use that information? Because we're used to seeing things in inches or potentially centimeters depending on where you are in the world. Now say, all right, if I want my design to be on a 14 count just like Shabby, and I know this is going to be finishing at 4 by 4, remember that we want a hoop. We need to allow the distance around the project, around the hoop, right? And then you have to think about, what are you going to do with this after it's cross-stitched? Is this going to remain in the hoop? Something very cute I've been seeing lately, people just literally leave it in the hoop and hang it on the wall. They trim off the excess, super cute. Some people will get kind of a mounting cardboard and kind of go around the edges. Maybe they might put fabric behind that. Some people will turn this into a pillow. So the point being, that depending on what you want to do with this project, even though this finishes only to 4x4, we're going to want to cut this closer to an 8x8. You need real estate around this to give you options and also to hoop. So I'm going to go ahead and clean some of this off and give you just a break, and I will get the white Aida cloth out, and I'm going to show you a technique that I have for cutting the Aida cloth as well as securing these edges, because with just contact, sometimes they can start to fray. So I've got a technique here that I'm going to show you that is, again, just an option, but it's something I've learned across the year, so I'll be right back. While I was clearing off the table, I found another thing that I had meant to put on the table, and this is one of my embroidery floss boxes. I've had this forever, and this is what I was talking about with the different compartments. In this case, because of the profile, my bobbins are to the side, again in numerical order, and I can just go, oh, yep, I need 676, 729, da 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 da. I have the floss boxes on order at the time of this filming, and by the time you're watching, they're probably in the building. So if you are looking for a box to store your embroidery floss once it's wrapped, this is a great option for you. Just wanted to mention that. Okay, I have the Aida cloth out of that roll, and you can see that is way bigger than we need, and we don't want to waste this, right? We want to be doing a lot of small projects. I am going to use the Hoopla. This is called Hoopla. This is actually a 7-inch frame. It's going to be a little bit easier for you to see my hands if they're not so close to the project. So I might cut this a little bit larger to probably maybe 9 inches, bigger than I need normally. But again, I want you to be able to see this once I get started. Now, I don't just kind of willy-nilly. I try to cut right up that pathway. It's perforated, so it's quite easy to do. Now, you could cut all the way straight up or over. Once you get to the about 9-inch mark, which is going to be about right in here. I think I'll just go straight up. So we have that to save for another day. And then turning this way, again, cutting our 9. So that's one way I like to cut the Aida cloth when the Aida cloth is too big for my project. Okay. I mentioned that the edge of the Aida cloth can fray just from contact. See that a little bit starting to happen? It can also be actually a little bit sharp. So one thing that I have done, I go out to my husband's workbench and he's like, hey, have you seen that blue tape? I'm like, what blue tape? And then I just quietly put it back in that garage now with a little bit less on it. So this is just a blue tape that he must get from Home Depot or Lowe's. And I have found it's a great option for putting along the edge of the cross stitch. If any of you out there that are watching want to leave a comment, I would love to hear of other ideas that you have about all of this. This is just something I have come to use. I kind of use what I have. But if there's a product out there that does this very job, we'd love to know about it. But this does work quite well. So I'll just keep wrapping that. So I can see the Aida cloth underneath there to see that I'm about the midpoint. And then I flip it over. smooth the tape down and give it a good press. And then I'll go ahead and finish up that, and then we'll talk about finding the center of our cross stitch, and then we'll go ahead and hoop it. So everything has been taped. So remember that we're really trying to find our center. Now, does it need to be perfectly centered? No. I don't think any of my projects have ever been perfectly centered. If you have a large project like what I've done before, and you have limited Aida cloth, and it's very important it's within a row or two, yeah, be more specific. But as a beginner, we have a large piece here. So we're going to fold this in half. Super scientific, right? Finding the center. And fold it in half. And I now know there's my center, right? Some people put a small little dot there, knowing it's going to be covered up. Some people are like, okay, let's look at this. I know that from the edge, I'm at 4.5 inches. However you want to do this, but remembering that our hoop is you can almost visually find it if you have the same distance around your hoop all the way around. Again, we have all kinds of real estate here extra, so it doesn't matter if you're off by a couple of rows. It's not going to matter. But that is a technique to finding that center. So the first thing that we do when we get ready to do our cross stitch is we separate this. I undo this, and I now have two pieces. Notice it says this side up, okay? So I've tried this before and it doesn't work too well. So make sure you have that side up, and that actually is going to go underneath. So I can kind of see it from above. My hands are kind of bracing it, and I can see I'm pretty even all the way around. Now I'm going to put the hoop on top, and I'm pressing that on. And if it's too tight, you might need to undo that just a little bit more and have it back off a little bit more. Okay, and I can still see my center. This is nice and snug. I'm going to tighten that down. And yes, some of the hoops have this little cap on the end to kind of try to keep you from poking yourself. Many times my hoop is so expanded that cap falls off. I don't think I normally need that, but I wanted to mention why it's there. Is it important that this is at the dead top? No, I've had it to the side, I've had it to the bottom. All that matters right now is that the project is well hooped, and you can kind of pull through just like this, all the way around. We just want it nice and taut. And then again, you can crank that down. Now, something I want to mention, I learned this lesson the hard way. Many times you are not going to be able to finish this entire cross stitch in one setting. Do not leave the hoop on when you walk away. As it is, when the project is done and the hoop is gone, you're going to need to, we'll talk about that. In fact, we'll talk about it now, is once the project is done, if you've used a hoop, you're going to see the remnants of where that hoop was. I cannot emphasize this enough. Wash your hands. As busy women, we are dealing with the mail and the laundry and our keys and our cell phones and groceries and just kids, everything. Our hands just have oils on them. Wash your hands every time before you touch this project. I have learned that. I've also learned to not do cross stitch in a dust storm when it was really windy, because what happened when I took the hoop out, this all had kind of taken on that dust but guess what didn't? Where the hoop had been. Now I was washing that cross stitch. So I've just learned, wash your hands before you do the project. Hoop very carefully, nice and taut, but do not leave that hoop in. It just makes it even harder later on when you do want to iron that away. And I always iron mine face down with a pressing cloth beneath it, with just a spritz of water with a pressing cloth on top, and I'm ironing it to get that hoop out. You don't want to make that worse by leaving that hoop in for days. Don't do it. Okay, now that that is there, we understand where our center is. What I'm going to do, and is a great place to start, is to start in the center. We know that these lines are indicating the center. I have the dark red that we could start with and come all the way to the bottom, and I think that's a great place to start. And as you will see, one of the first things I do is establishing, okay, where am I starting? And with how am I going to start counting this thing? Remember that from 30 to 40 we know is 10, of course. So if we look up here, we already know from 30 to 40, that's 10 stitches in between, 11, 12, 13, 14. So ignore everything above the line right now. Don't look at anything above that line. I'm going to cover that up so you're not even looking at that. Where I'm counting is from this bold line to this bold line we know is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I automatically know when we start, I'm going to do 14 down, but I'm not just going to go straight down. I'm going to be coming over. And this happens to also be 14. Right? We went easy on you. We made this very symmetrical. But we're going to go ahead and adjust to a completely different setting so that you can see exactly what I'm doing, how I'm counting, how we flow, how we end our embroidery floss and begin again with a new strand, and there will be no knots. Knots are not part of cross stitch unless you're doing a French knot for embellishment, which is way downstream. Certainly there may be projects we do with that, but that is nothing that we'll be doing. So let me get adjusted and take you to the next step of actually starting our first cross stitch together. So this is a very typical setup for me. Get a comfy couch, usually a comfy quilt. I have my cross stitch pattern and my hooped project, my scissors, and usually of course my DMC is nearby. So we already know that we can still see the crease from our center, and as we look at our pattern here, you can see this is a great place to start. I again cut a length that was from here and back much longer, twice as long as the way I learned, and you're going to see right now why that is so incredibly effective, where I had one long strand but broke both ends up and threaded the needle, which creates this loop. So we're going to first put in that stitch by simply coming up from behind and knowing that we have that loop back there. So I'm trying to turn this so you can see. It's that first hole on the diagonal. So that's where I'm going to go down. And remember, I've got a loop back here. I'm just going to turn this over and watch me go right under that loop. Done. There is absolutely no way that this will ever come undone short of this thread that will be falling apart, and that's not going to happen. So this is my favorite. I call this looping on. I don't know if there's a technical term. I call it looping on, and it's my favorite way to start every single time whenever I can do that. Now, because we just have the one stitch here, and we're only concentrating in this segment. We're going to move down and we're going to move right. That's the normal flow whenever you can. So I'm going to complete that X by coming up, or try to come up right there, and come right back down up there. We have completed that stitch. Now we simply come down to the hole beneath this, and we'll come up here and over. Now we need to do 2 of those. So you can see this is very simple to do. Coming over 1, you always go all the way over and come back. Now, I'm going to point out something else here. Notice how we're always going to the right, always coming back left. That's what you're doing every single time. The fact that the thread on the top is going from the bottom right to the upper left is a constant. Do not ever mix where some of the top threads are going this way and some are going that way. It's going to give a very weird visual look to the project and will really throw off all of your hard work. So that is something else that is very important, that everything is always flowing in that direction on the top. The bottom one goes to the right, top one goes to the left. And that's just the world of cross stitch. Now, let me say this. If you happen to be, I'm going to drop this and let this untwist if it was. If you, for some reason, preferred your top thread to go in the opposite direction, that's fine, but everything needs to do that. I've never actually seen that in a cross stitch. It doesn't mean it can't happen. If there's some reason you prefer that, that's fine. But again, just everything needs to move in the same direction. So we've done this row, and now we're going to go 3, and then 4, and then 5. And you can see this just goes. So let me just get some rhythm going here. Now, sometimes I might feel like the embroidery floss has a little bit of a twist in it. And if that's true, sometimes I'll just smooth that out. I wouldn't normally have a twist yet, but it can develop as you continue to stitch. And now we come back. The tension, all I'm doing is trying to make sure that from the side, everything is just laying equally. So it's like with any project, you don't want to be yanking it so tight that you're creating a pucker, but not so loose that you've got this loopy thing going on. And you will soon develop your own rhythm, your own tension that is your signature, and it's very straightforward. It'll become obvious to you what to do. So I'm going to just keep stitching here, and I want to get to the point where I feel like the embroidery floss is so short that I want to end this. I want to show you the proper way to end cross stitching. You might want to do that when number 1, it gets short, or you may have just, that's it. Maybe there's a small area with this color and you need to just end it, right? So I'm going to let this drop again and untwist because I don't want twists in there. And then I'll come back. Normally when I'm cross stitching, I'm very close to myself. Maybe I'll try that. It's a little awkward, tipped away from myself. It makes it a little more challenging to find the hole that I normally know is right there. There we go. I'm going a little bit quicker now. You'll get your proper angle where you begin to know this is your sweet spot for stitching. You'll be able to acquire the location a lot quicker. So you can see we've done 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. And you will continue on, remembering that we're going to be doing 14, right? This whole thing is the same color because the legend is telling me I've got color 3777. That's my symbol. And that all makes sense. And then we go back. If you look at this project, this and they're all the same. All of these are the same of this. Now, let me point this one thing out to you. When it comes to the kind of that darky salmon here, on this one, the reds were 14. They're 14 this way, they're 14 this way. But I can see 10 or 30 to 40 is 10, 11, 12, 13. On the salmon color, these are 13. But again, you count. I have made the mistake of making assumptions. And guess what I did? Unstitched. So yes, we should always count, but we can begin to make assumptions sometimes when things appear to be entirely symmetrical. So again, the red, both this way and this way, is 14 vertically, 14 across, but the salmon is 13 this way, and it's 13 this way. So that's something to think about in here. And then we have the same thing, but these are the same shapes. It's the same concept. So we just continue down. Now, let's pretend that we're ready to tie off. And actually, I want to do one more row. I have, just to refresh myself on cross stitch, because I've never really taught cross stitch before. I've always just done it, taught my mom and a few friends, but nothing like this for the world to see and enjoy. And I recently had a chance to kind of watch and see what else is out there in the world and what people are teaching others about cross stitch. And the one thing I would love to discourage you from doing that I've seen a little bit of is people tying knots as a way to start cross stitching. And I just think it's not a great idea. I would love to discourage you from that because knots can come undone, especially if you wash it, if there's any kind of a use of that product, it can come undone, and now all the good work you've done has been lost. So we know that we tied on in a super secure way with that loop on. How do we end this? We're going to pretend that I'm coming near the end of this, and I felt like I just needed to kind of end it, right? You'll know. Everyone loves to have a nice, long, fresh strand of DMC and get stitching, but no one enjoys those really short pieces where you're like, I know I need to end this and start again. So let's pretend we're at that place and we needed to end this. First off, make sure you leave enough to end, at least this much. That is for sure when you need to end this. So what we do is we turn our project over and we stay very horizontal, fishing underneath over and over again. I try to go at least 5 times, and it doesn't matter if I'm going under a blue, white, it does not matter. I just really want to secure this I'm going to pull it through till I have that completely flat. Then I'm going to clip that quite close because I have it so secured. That is not coming out. All right, so that's where we are. Now, let's say that there are many cross stitches. In fact, the ones that you've seen that I've done before, where you only do maybe a small area and then you move on to another area with the same color. Well, how do we do this now? How do we loop on, Jen, when you just cut this thing and now we truly do have two ends and there's no way to loop on? I'm going to show you this because this is how many people cross stitch, and many people who cut a length from their wrist to their shoulder and they get two strands like that, this is how they would start. And there's nothing wrong with this. It's more work and it's not as secure but can be quite secure. So I'm going to continue this cross stitch now with our next one with, just like I said, we have two threads down here that are separate. There is no loop to scoop through like you saw me do. So how you do that is we're coming up, we're going to come down. Now, I need to leave a tail back here that I now have to hop over many times. I'm just going to put that pattern off to the side. It's kind of noisy. So you see how I now need to kind of keep those threads flowing this way, out of the way. So when I come back to the front, now I'm going to hop over. So we're trapping that tail. And I try to do this at least 4 times. See how much time this takes? It's also a little bit messier on the back. You can see where we started, you have no tail. You cannot even see really where I started. Now I'm going to go over one more time, trying to make sure I'm on this side. So I keep having to move that, right? Then on the back side, I'm hopping over it. I might do it one more time, or maybe all the way down that run. Might as well do it one more time. So this is how I cross-stitched and how I started until that wonderful flight attendant explained to me there was a better way to do it, saved me time, and was more secure, and she could not have been more correct about that. And so now we simply come back. Okay. So you can now see and decide for yourself whether you want to start the way we did with the twice as long length looping on, or you want to do this. But remember, when you are doing more complex cross stitches where you may be doing only a small area of a color and then you have to cut your thread because your other place is too far away, you will end up starting the way I just did. There are times where this is unavoidable. The last thing I want to talk to you about in this first Learn to Cross Stitch video is what distance is acceptable to kind of jump, and when should you tie off, as I did, as I showed you how, and simply start again. And my answer to you would be how important is this project to you? How is this something that is an heirloom to you? Is this something that is you're just kind of messing around, trying to get the feeling of cross stitch, and it's nothing you're going to covet or maybe display in the future, go for it. If you're just trying to get a rhythm of this, where you can jump from maybe here to there, I don't do that. To me, if my next cross stitch was down here, I am absolutely going to cut that thread. But if my next cross stitch, let's pretend my next cross stitch was down here, first thing I would probably do, I'm just pretending right now, is I would come here I'm trying to minimize that distance, right? It doesn't matter whether I go from here to there or there to here. All it matters is that that top thread is going this direction. So again, does it matter if I go here to here? Or does it, here, let me show what I'm talking about. Let's do that again. Remember that I've been going here to here, there to there. But it doesn't matter if I went here to here and there to there. Those stitches are 100% identical. It does not matter. This is why there is a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of maneuverability, and that jump I would not find unacceptable. Would I allow that in my back of the project and start it? Never, never happening. Now, one other thing you can do if you've had to do this kind of jumping over here to grab a couple stitches, and again, the more elaborate cross stitches you do, it is not uncommon to do a stitch or two here and a stitch or two here. It's impractical to just start again, right? And you don't have a tail to secure. What I would do if I had a project like this is I would fish my way back upstream as I tried to secure my thread into something else, like this, and then I would tie off. Now, obviously for our first project, there's nothing even like that. This is so straightforward, right? This is you stitching a bunch of blocks, switching your thread, and doing the same thing with your blues. So you can see this is very simple to do, very relaxing. Notice how little equipment I have. Most of the time when I'm quilting, I have my machine. I have so many things around me, and it's a wonderful hobby, but it's also a hobby I can only do in a specific location. I love the cross stitch, and I certainly love quilting, but quilting isn't as portable as this is. So I hope that you can see this is an easily learned craft, wonderfully portable, and it would be something that would be just a nice gift. You could do small projects, you can do elaborate projects, and you can be sure there'll be many, many more videos to come. So as you can see, cross stitch is so easy to learn. I love the portability of it, the quietness of it. It helps pass the time with delays and long road trips, and it's great to make for maybe home decor or giving as gifts. So as you know, we love to teach here. We're so passionate about sharing the things we know how to do and techniques maybe we've been doing for decades, such as cross stitch. So if you have not already subscribed, be sure to do that now and hit the bell. And if you know a friend that has been waiting and wanting to learn how to cross stitch, I hope you'll share the good news of Shabby Fabrics with them. Thanks again. I look forward to seeing you on a future video.